Here's a fun question. Are you good enough to be where you are? I mean, you must be, because you're there, right? Today on Bottomless Coffee, we're talking with Rae Hunter. Rae is this close to securing her PhD from Emory University, despite having to overcome outright adversity, outright racism, and a form of imposter syndrome. In our conversation, we discuss how Rae has had to leverage resilience, strategic thinking, and self-care to achieve her goal of becoming a scientist. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Bottomless Coffee. This time we're going to talk about growth, how we grow, how we become maybe not better people necessarily, but different, and how that can be really uncomfortable if you're not used to it. And I want to give you just an example from my personal experience. You know, I'm relating it back to that political campaign again. I hate fundraising. Fundraising is the worst. And when I looked back and kind of did that autopsy of the campaign, I was like, Jerome, you knew it was a weakness before you started. It remained a weakness the whole time. You just stayed uncomfortable with it instead of leaning into it. And so that is actually why at the beginning of all of these episodes, we start with join our Patreon community and support this content, because that helps me become accustomed to asking for support. And you know, by the time I get to my next campaign, I'm really hoping to be like that Bernie meme. You know, it'll be me and some mittens or what have you, and we will really be going for it. So today we are here with Rae Hunter. Hi, Rae.
Hi, how are you doing? It's so great to be here.
Yes, it's really just a privilege to have you. I'm really excited for this conversation. And for our listeners, Rae is the sister to Ron Hunter from episode 6. And no pressure, it is still our most popular episode.
Guess we have some competition. We have to beat him out today.
I think I heard that you're competitive. I'm not sure.
Just a little bit, you know. He did always beat me in Monopoly, so.
Oh, really? Okay. So since you brought up childhood, and what he told us about your journey is that you grew up, you became, I believe, an educator.
That's correct.
Okay, and then at some point you switched careers, and now you're pursuing a PhD at Emory University.
At Emory University, yes, in cancer
Okay.
biology. Mhm.
Now we're gonna go through all of that because
Yeah, we
I'm
have a
so
lot.
interested. But the perspective is gonna be on your growth and growing outside of your comfort zone. So would you mind just giving us like a? I know I just kind of walked through it a little bit, but fill in some of those details on where you started and how you got to where you are now.
Yes, definitely. So during my undergraduate time, I went to Georgia State University undergrad, go Panthers.
Woo!
During that time, I actually was a psychology major. So I majored in psychology, did a bachelor's of science for that degree. And during my third year, I decided I actually wanted to pursue medical school. And
Hmm.
so I took additional courses and so was on track to do medicine and obtain my MD.
Okay.
I was very passionate about addressing inequities in education just from a lot of my experiences at Georgia State as an undergrad.
Mm.
And so during this gap time, you know, usually people take a gap year. So I took a gap 2 years and additionally even more years. I'll explain that a little later.
Sure.
Um, but I actually applied for Teach for America and I was accepted and I became a
Oh,
2011
wonderful.
core member. And so Teach for America, typically they'll do a summer training for you. And then you will be placed in a school that is in need of teachers and typically in underserved areas for
Yes.
education.
Doing the work.
So I always wanted to be a teacher. Interesting story. I used to set up my little plush animals and
Oh,
make
okay.
tests for them and do all of that. I loved getting stickers and like grading, helping teachers grade when I was growing up, all of that. And so I actually became a educator, and
Yeah.
I was placed in eighth grade physical science. So I taught eighth grade physical science. That, talking about growth and development, that was a very tough time for me, where
Hmm.
I honestly, I was still growing into an adult, like what I wanted, what I desired for myself, who I was, and then also who I am as an educator, especially in my first year of teaching. And you get training, and the training was very rigorous. It was great training, but I always tell people there's nothing like actually being in the classroom
Sure.
that will make you an actual teacher. You can get all the training in the world, but your best training is in that first year of actually
Yeah.
teaching your own classroom and being a leader in that classroom. And so a lot of growing pains, what works for me as an educator, like how do I motivate my students? How do I, engage them with the material, especially in science? A lot of them by eighth grade just did not think they were smart enough to do science,
Oh
weren't
no.
interested. Yeah, it was very interesting to see, and also heartbreaking at times to see my students get defeated and feel they did not have the intelligence to actually complete the work that we were
Wow.
engaging in and doing. So one of the things I love to do is I had a chemistry portion, and everybody loves food. So
Yeah.
we would do a lot of cool experiments that always, somehow there was food in the mix. We would make butter, ice cream, talk about chemical and
Oh
physical
sure.
changes. What are these molecules? What do they make up? Just to engage them in it and for them to have fun and see science isn't for a certain person that looks a certain way. We all can do science. We all can engage with this, and you all are young scientists. So that was became my mission as
Oh,
a
that's
teacher
beautiful.
for those 2 years. And then I really enjoyed it. And I did an additional 2 years after that. So I taught for 4 years. And around my third year, I decided I actually wanted to pursue a PhD and
Okay.
engage in research instead, because of the impact that I would have on a larger group of individuals. So if I develop some treatment, and then that can actually be applied in our society for a lot of people that are affected by a certain disease, I decided to go ahead and pursue that instead. And
Oh,
that was an experience as well. Going back to school full time, I
oh
first went
yeah.
to complete my master's. I needed some more research experience because I was, of course, a psychology undergrad student. And so I did not have as much lab research experience that I needed. And I knew I wanted to focus on cancer research because of our family history of breast cancer.
Oh, okay.
So I applied for my PhD, and I was very thankful to actually get accepted in Emory University in the fall of
Wonderful.
2016.
Wonderful. Oh, 2016. Okay. Now, is that a 7-year degree?
We're almost there.
Oh, yeah.
It is not. Typically, within our program, people graduate within 5.5 to 6 years.
Oh, so
So
you're
I'm
really close.
actually near the finish line for my program now.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Okay, so this is exciting. Starting at the beginning, you really wanted to be a teacher. Um, as a child, you said stuffed animals and stickers. And it kind of sounds like um, you didn't have a lot of practical knowledge about what it would mean to be a teacher. And even though, but you went to college for psychology, which is a little different. Um, and I keyed in on something there that you noticed the disparities in our education system. And it sounds like maybe that kind of reconnected you to your youthful passion. Is that okay? You're nodding.
That's yes,
Okay.
definitely. I initially, when I went into school for college, I think I had an idea of what I wanted to do. Teaching was not on that list at all. I will be very honest with you. Somehow
Mm-hmm.
I did get away from that, like as a child, like becoming a teacher. And when I was a part of some initiatives that were led by some administrators at Georgia State, we had the opportunity to go into classrooms and just see the differences in the education and the system
Yeah.
that was set up in these different schools in Atlanta, and what makes the difference for a thriving community of students and parents and faculty and staff, and things that are missing that end up affecting those different entities. So I became very interested in wanting to do Teach for America at that time. After that, and I love psychology. I could explain, like, I really had no clue. I was political science at one point, and I thought about
Mhm.
English another time. But I really loved the idea. I loved all my psychology classes, just learning about people and why we think the way we think, why we act the way we act. And it just always stuck with me. So I decided to pursue that as a major instead.
Now, did you labor over the decision to kind of leave the idea of a psychologist behind to become a teacher?
I did not actually. I actually at the end of my degree, there was this gap. I thought I'd be able to work with my boss I was currently with as a student, but then I was let go actually. She tried
Sure.
to keep me, but she couldn't. And it was during a recession, so it was 2008.
Yeah.
So it was really difficult for me to find a job because I didn't have as much experience in psychology either. And if you do a psychology degree, you definitely have to go on and do a master's and potentially a PhD.
Oh, okay.
So during that gap, I actually started substitute teaching.
Oh,
And then I was like, I'm applying for Teach for America. I want to teach. I want to go ahead and do this before I go into my next step. So I was studying for my MCAT and then also in the process of applying for Teach for America at that time.
oh, you're doing a lot.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. My brother tells me, he's like, you don't have a traditional path, talk to people about your experience too, because I went all the way through, So
hmm
but I definitely got a lot of different life experiences outside of academia, um, working, just working full time, working with students, and then I've had the opportunity to teach as well at Emory, which I've loved. So that's still there. That passion is definitely still there.
So, from the perspective of growing outside of your comfort zone and really keying in on an uncomfortable time in your life, which was, sounds like right after graduation, during a recession,
Definitely.
um, which we might end up being in again. We're not sure how economically
I'm
things are going to
graduating
shake
from
out, right?
it.
Now, with some people, I think maybe could have spiraled. They could have really stuck to that path of psychology and said, well, no matter what, this is what I've already put time into this, and so I'm going to move forward. And it sounds like maybe you saw Teach for America as an opportunity for you to grow. And I don't know if at that time you had said, this is going to be my forever path or what have you. But you certainly took something out of the experience from from America, and I'd love to hear more about it.
So I always saw Teach for America. They were advertising on our campus. And from my experience that I had, I was interested in doing that. And I think somewhere in getting ready to graduate, trying to take my med school, classes that I needed as requirements to apply. And then, graduating and wanting to apply, study for my MCAT, I got lost in the sauce.
Mm.
And got away from, oh, I should apply for Teach for America. And then during my time when I was just working, I decided that I wanted to take some time to actually go back and apply and teach, because that was something that I was very interested in and passionate about. And it, I learned a lot of skills being
Mm.
in Teach for America. And it was definitely uncomfortable because you have these really quick deadlines and turnarounds. During Summer Institute, we're waking up at like 5 in the morning, going to get your breakfast,
Oh.
going off to the school you were assigned to learn, to teach actual students and train under that, and then revise lesson plans. You're always revising, doing lesson plans weekly, seeing what's going to engage your students, getting to know your students, also getting to know who you are in the classroom as a person. Because you might have one style that works great for you. And if I try to adopt your style, it's going to just fall flat because that's
Mm.
not me, right? That's not my personality. And so learning, like, okay, this person did this way and that looked great. And then you try it and students are like looking at you like a deer in headlights. Like, no, that's not me. That's not gonna work for me. So something I learned out of there, especially, they really honed in on time management, which I think sometimes I'm great at and sometimes I still need to work at. But something really big that they focus on is culture. So classroom culture, and are your
Hmm.
students motivated? Are they excited to come into the classroom? Do they want to work for you and also for themselves, right? And thinking about even where I am at in my PhD program, I realize even more how much culture is important for where I'm at and me thriving.
Hmm.
And not having certain things in place where people matter and people are not just there to work and crank out tons of data or execute things. There's a person behind that who's
Yeah.
going through things, who has experience, has emotions, like has their own personality that can add to the mix in a very positive way if you just engage with that and leverage it. I really learned being a part of Teach for America, and even more so now, like how important environment and culture is, and just having that support and that positive energy infused into whatever you
Yes.
do. So that time was very difficult, learning how to be a teacher. I mean, I had some students, it was really hard for me initially to manage my classroom and get my students invested in it. And I'm like, this is important to do. And they're like, but we don't understand why this is important, why science even matters.
Hmm.
And finding out how to connect that with their everyday lives is what really mattered the most. And when I was able to do that successfully, like my student engagement turned around and my students, wanted to learn and wanted to be engaged in the classroom. And then just getting to know them, you will be surprised how you already know. It's just caring about someone on a personal level, how much that makes them want to do whatever, do the work and really be engaged because
Hmm.
you see them. You don't just see some person sitting in the seat that needs to do this activity or execute that, but you know them as a person and they come in and you're like, this is not a good day for you. I get it,
Oh, okay.
and they appreciate that, knowing that they're human first. They're people and they're going through different things. I've had some students who come in and haven't ate for the day or,
Hmm.
are really having problems at home, things that I never had to experience at their age. And it's really about meeting that person where they are first and foremost, and then building from there.
So it's interesting. I'm hearing kind of an echo when you talk about what your students needed and how they needed to be seen as full humans, and how they needed to have their human experience really recognized by someone. I'm hearing that for your students, but I'm also hearing that for you. And there was a moment there when you were talking about teaching for America and how it was very difficult, but you were sharing it with a big smile on your face. And I wonder if there's something about the type of growth that you get coming out of a difficult experience. There's this ability to look back and say, I learned a lot from that hard time. And I don't think everyone has that. And I think it's very easy to look back on a difficult time and be like, yeah, it was hard. Yeah, my kids were very sad. Yeah, my kids didn't get what they needed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And um, really get overcome by the negativity instead of looking back on that same experience saying, well, this is what I'm able to draw out from this. This is what I was able to do. And so thank you for sharing just that little bit of that part of your journey, because that's not all of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you pivoted, you left education. And what led you to that decision? Because it sounds like you were feeling like you were doing good work in the classroom. You had students who were not in a good culture coming through. You said eighth grade, so coming through K through 7, they did not have a Rae Hunter educator, because they felt like they weren't good enough, they weren't smart enough, and what have you. And so you were building them back up. which is very good work, and the work that you wanted to be doing as a child. So, you mentioned maybe your personal family history that made you really take a look at chemistry. And without, sharing too much of the personal stuff with the whole internet, um, what happened?
So I knew I wanted to do medicine. Even going into Teach for America,
That's true. That's
I was
true.
focused on I know I'm going back to school full time to pursue a professional degree. So it took me a while. Obviously, I took an additional 2 years. I enjoyed teaching, and I also felt like it was time for my next step as well in
Mm.
that final year of teaching.
Oh, we should circle around back to that. Okay, we're gonna get back to that as she talks. Time for your next step. Okay.
So I was gonna do medicine, and then I just knew internally that I needed to shift,
Mm,
and I was invested in going ahead and transitioning into a PhD instead. And I feel like honestly, I would not have been able to do that or even think about myself as a PhD, as a scientist in
mm,
undergrad. Like I was not ready to accept that about myself and even my own intellect. And I've told other people before, I wasn't ready to even consider or think about that as a senior in college. I didn't think I had the ability,
mm.
similar to how my students just like, I'm not smart enough to do science. I didn't
Yeah.
think that was me. It's like, well, I'm not a scientist. I'm stuck somewhere in a lab doing whatever. I'm not that smart. Like literally, these are the thoughts I've had. And you're like, where did that even come from? But
Yeah.
it's just something that I internalized, and maybe not seeing a lot of representation of, individuals that look like me that were doing science. Obviously I had my brother to look up to, but he's on this pedestal for me too. Like, oh, he can do everything. My brother's so smart. He's a genius, you know?
Oh.
Here
He is
I
wonderful.
am. Right. Big shoes to fill. So I didn't even think about it. It's funny now because we'll talk. He's like, don't talk to me about biology. I do chemistry, and it's hilarious.
Oh.
But I knew I wanted to do research, and it had to be cancer research because our family history, we do have a history of breast cancer. I actually lost my grandmother to
Mm.
it, and my mom is a breast cancer survivor as well. And so thankful for her, and us being there for through her battle, and her being in remission right now,
Oh, good.
and continually for the rest of her life.
Yes. Yes. Speak it into being.
Yes, definitely, definitely. So, I've seen that experience. I saw her go through chemo and how hard that is on the body. And those are still current standard care treatments that we use. And I want to be a part of this next phase of treatments and discovery, for patients, targeted towards different types of cancer. So, people are like, where's the cure for cancer? There's not necessarily one hit bullet.
Mm.
Every cancer is just different. It's just very different. And one thing that might work for one type of cancer is not going to work for another.
Yeah.
And so I was interested in wanting to pursue that because of that personal connection. And then being engaged with my mentor that I had at Georgia State for my master's degree. She's amazing, and also a Black woman. And that
Mm-hmm.
empowered me even more to pursue this, and apply for my PhD with her guidance through it all as well. And I was accepted into Emory University. And that was my first choice. And I was really excited
Okay.
when I
Okay.
got the acceptance. Yeah.
So let me ask you, because it sounds like you had um, maybe an inferiority complex or imposter syndrome or something, and she's nodding. Everyone, she's nodding. Uh, but we really got from, you didn't think you could do it till you did it. So like in the story that you just shared. So there's something in the middle for sure that must have been really uncomfortable. Did you apply to for your PhD thinking you were not going to be accepted?
Uh, I I thought I would get into one program at least.
Okay.
Just based on how I put my application together. I was a strong student as far as my GPA. But I know also testing, like my GRE scores, they weren't awful, but for certain areas, especially my math, like, and I have testing anxiety too, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But just based on that, I think what someone would require, I may have just automatically been booted out just based on that, even with all of my other experiences. So I felt strongly about myself as a candidate, but I also know people check boxes in admissions at times. And so you, in a way, you may lose really good candidates because of that.
Well, yeah, I think sometimes people like yourself who are obviously qualified because you got in, right? Even as you're talking about it, you're like, I don't know if my bubble is good enough. I'm like, you're in the school. You're about to graduate.
No, you have so many doubts though. And I even my first year going into Emory, I'm around my other peers and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're brilliant. And why am I here? Like, I honestly asked that. I did have imposter syndrome, and it was really tough for me my first year. Because,
Yeah.
I didn't come from a traditional biology background. I
Hmm.
took, I did my master's courses and I took biology classes in that setting. But I did not have 4 years of just straight biology and chemistry courses as
Yeah.
well. So there was a lot of, I would say for me, gaps in some of the concepts that I had to study and work even harder for to get because I just didn't have all of that initially. So it really did play even more so into why am I here? Like, do I have
I
the
mean, but you're
intelligence?
doing it. You're almost to the point where you did it.
Yeah.
And
There's definitely been this transition and this, I would say, like being uncomfortable,
yeah.
being at this place where a lot of things were unknown for me and uncomfortable. Like the growth happened in those spaces. So I don't know. It's my first year here. This is a whole different setup. And also like this is more material, and everyone's getting new material too and trying to learn it. And it's not the most comfortable place at all for you to be in.
Hmm.
And you have to keep pushing and learning and working hard for it and not giving up because you could easily, say, I'm just going to pursue this anymore. I'm just going to step away. I think, completing my PhD, a lot of it, and for a lot of people pursuing a PhD, half the battle is your intellect, and the other half is just perseverance and being able to have that stamina to get through.
Yeah.
Because it can be very daunting, it can be difficult, and there are different challenges at different phases of your program, while you're going through and completing your degree. And being able to continue to push on is what matters the most, not giving up.
So, and I think one way of thinking about it that I find helpful from because I went to law school, and the first year is terrible, but after the first year, if someone asks you if you can ever get through the first year of law school, you're like, yeah, I know I can do it because I did it. And I think a lot of people need someone to tell them that they can do it. It sounds like you had your mentor, you had Ron, you had a lot of people cheering for you. And on the off chance anyone is listening who isn't sure, like you can do it. It can be done. You could be like Rae in the thick of it. You're like, how did I get here? Oh my gosh, this is impossible. And that
Just
can be
don't
the
quit.
story you
Just
tell
don't
yourself.
quit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't
Don't quit.
quit
That's the
because,
only time you will not be able to get, like, if you just quit and leave, you're
yes.
not there to complete the work anymore. So,
Yes, and this is a great segue to our next topic on resilience because it does take some resilience to get through the hard times. But let's take a quick coffee break, um, gather our caffeine, and then we'll be right back.
caffeine's always good.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, we are back with Rae Hunter, who jumped the gun on me and got into it because I promised you that we were going to get back to talk about not just resilience, but also how she knew it was time to take that next step. And in that coffee break, I said, "Well, it sounds, like a different type of discomfort or uncomfortable." And then she started leaning in, and I was like, "Whoop." So please, I'm sorry I had to interrupt your thought for the introduction. But yeah, I really am very interested in how you knew it was time for that next step and what that sensation was like. Because it is different from when you had to put your head down and just trust that you were going to get through your PhD work. So, how did you know when it was time to leave?
Definitely. So I always enjoyed teaching. I loved being in the classroom, working with eighth graders, and then I just started losing the interest and the passion that I had for that. And I knew, I was going to continue on. And I said, if I stay here, like I might just continue teaching, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I ultimately knew I wanted to pursue a higher degree. So I just started losing some of the same motivation that I had
Mhm.
before in my last year of teaching. And that's to anybody's disservice, definitely my students and to myself. And I knew it was time for me to transition in that because I just didn't have the same energy that I once had for putting into doing lesson plans and working with
Yeah.
my students and engaging with them on the level that I wanted to. It seemed like it was more effort than before. And
Mm-hmm.
I knew like with that, I needed to take a step back and look into making the transition now. And I had, I didn't feel that way after year two of teaching or year three, but going into, in my last year teaching, probably around the early spring, I knew like, okay, now it's time for me to go ahead and look into my next steps.
Yeah, I
Um,
think the word that you used was fizzling. It was
Fizzling.
fizzling out
Yeah.
for you. Yeah.
Yes, fizzling. I definitely was getting flat. You want to stick there with soda.
And it is a very different type of discomfort. If you feel yourself fizzling out, then our advice to you would not be to stick with it and to keep moving forward. But now let's talk a little bit about resilience. Um, Resilience and stretching yourself. We've talked a lot about it a lot with we've talked about it with actors, two different actors so far. Familial caregivers who feel maybe almost weathered by the experience of having to care for a loved one. Um, Talk to me about your experience with resilience. I know you've touched on it a little bit, but I'm interested in your take.
Uh, so resilience for me has been having a lot of different negative experiences, especially
Mm,
going through my PhD, and still being able to recover from those experiences very quickly and not letting them weigh me down,
yeah.
not letting them take over and take power over me and restrict me from continuing on my journey and on my path of what I know I need to do and who I know I am.
Mm,
Even in my interviewing process, I remember for my PhD, I had a professor tell me, while interviewing me, telling me not to apply, that I shouldn't be there, and I should go back and be a research specialist for several more years before pursuing my PhD.
oh,
First interview I ever had actually for my PhD program. That's
wow.
what somebody told me. I did not accept it. I did not go into that school.
Yeah.
But yeah, that started off my actual interview process for my PhD. The next two institutions, of course, one of them was Emory. They were much better, pleasant experiences.
Mm-hmm.
But if I had let that one moment, just cripple me, and then I had two other interviews after that day, I had to just bounce back. I had to bounce back and put on a good face for my next interview. And even, being in labs, we do different rotations, and I've had an experience with another professor who just didn't really believe in my abilities as a
Mm.
student and what I could contribute. And I think they put me in a very stereotypical box of what I would be as a student, especially as a Black woman.
I was like, oop.
Say it again.
What is that stereotypical box?
I think in this professor's eyes, lazy, not really willing to work, always going to be late, just making up excuses. And even when I tried to explain how it was an adjustment for me being coming into a space where I did not see a lot of people at all like me, and coming
Mm-hmm.
from a very diverse institution before that, that was even difficult for me. And I definitely finding community was even more important when I came into that space, and I was able to do that thankfully. But in that setting, like that was I was not supported. I knew I wasn't going to be, and I had to also transition. Um, so those experiences, where I could have chosen, oh, I'm just gonna leave my program because I am in a setting now that's not good, it's toxic for me.
Yeah.
I did not choose to leave. I worked with some other people in that space, and they were able to help me transition and get into a better lab space for me. But
Oh.
those are moments, where you can just choose to go based
Mm-hmm.
on, others people's opinions of you and what they're telling you that you aren't when you know what you can do and what you're capable of. And it can
Yes.
get to you. It can really get to you. But having those people, like you said earlier, like that are supporting you, having that community of people that are going to push you still is so critical to being able to endure and to rise above, no matter what. That was very integral to me continuing on in my program and being successful, is having that support system and that network. And then also internally knowing, like, this is what I am going to do. This is what I am called to do. Like, I know this is a part of my purpose and what I want to do for my life.
Mm-hmm.
Having that internal motivation as well, because external will go and come, and there will be all kind of people trying to mess that up for you, mess up
Yes.
your motivation. But you have to have that internal compass and drive of still pushing through for what know you have signed yourself up to do and you will accomplish.
Okay. Well, you gave us a lot to unpack there. And I was kicking myself under the table because I interrupted you when you were referring to your experience as a black woman having to deal with this professor. And we glazed over it a little bit. But what I was hearing, I think, loud and clear, was that this person expected you to fall into the trope of the black woman or black person,
Yeah.
lazy, full of excuses, not intelligent, what have you. Because it was racist. We can say racist here. This is a safe space.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, and so, one, I'm really sorry that that happened because that is never a positive experience. And I'm so happy that you'd already built up the necessary resilience to keep pushing forward despite this person. Because there are a couple of ways it could have gone. You could have stayed there and they would have failed you, or they would have given you less than you deserved.
Mhm.
Which would have impacted you forever, right? But instead, you made the choice somehow to get put into another lab. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Um, and it, but when we previously talked about resilience, we talked about how sometimes at some stages it can feel like just needing to survive. And I got a hint of that. It almost sounded like you needed to survive discrete moments, maybe discrete periods, certainly during that particular lab. Um, there were maybe like kind of like the dull ache of the new experience in general, and then these acute moments of pain, almost like a dental pain.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you said definitely. Okay, good. Because I
Yeah.
don't want to put words in
Sometimes
your
a
mouth. I'm
general,
just like,
yeah, general dullness, I think, for some of the experiences that you're just not used to encountering. And
mhm,
then these very specific moments of time where someone has spoken to me a certain way or has treated me a certain way, even if it's, passively, um, that those are definitely acute, and you feel those even more. And the question is, do you become numb, or how do you advocate for yourself in these spaces?
mhm,
And I talk to other grad students a lot about this too, and a lot of times we don't feel like we have a voice in a way to speak and say certain things because we still need to get our degree, and
Yeah.
to what degree will someone prevent that from happening if we do speak out about certain things? So it's a really hard space to be in at times, depending on things you experience and what you go through. And there are things in place at most universities for you to talk about and share out if you have certain experiences that just should not be happening at all as graduate
Yeah.
students. But I think there's still that layer of concern, like if this gets out, what's going to happen to me possibly finishing, Um,
Yes.
so
Retaliation is real. Retaliation is real.
yeah,
And it's it sucks, but as black people, we are kind of, at least I was, I don't want to speak for you, I was brought up with the understanding that there will be situations that suck and you will need to find a strategy to either go around or go through or go under or what have you.
exactly. Yeah. No, that's exactly it. Yeah, definitely.
uh, which I don't like.
Like, how do you manage this?
Yeah, yeah. We had an episode dedicated to anti-racism, and one of the big takeaways I think for our co-host Brendan, who is white-bodied, is that I can't go to your house and like teach your kids or your family or whatever, not how not to be racist, but that professor could have very well been his grandfather or something, and well, this is the truth. They let their families get away with all kinds of stuff to our detriment and
Yeah,
our pain. And if they are going to be anti-racist allies, then you got to step up.
exactly. Yeah.
Period.
I think in some spaces too, I should have had more advocacy, and
Mm,
I asked myself, to what degree would if let's say I become a professor, to what degree would a student come to me about certain concerns, and I would want to protect myself over like advocating for my student, right?
mhm.
And to me, I would those are not something I ever have to think about. I'm going to advocate for my student, and I guess I can say this easily because maybe I don't have some position I'm trying to protect and job security, but I would not feel good as a person not advocating for that student
Yeah.
in a certain way, right? Because you do have to manage and be aware of the space you're in and how to maneuver that appropriately. But I would
Hmm.
always advocate for my student. I will never make excuses for someone else treating my student a certain way. And I've had that happen in certain spaces, and it's been very disappointing that someone that is supposed to be a part of your network and community not support you in that way, in that space.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'm glad you had the resilience to get through it. I'm glad you had the tenacity to stick with it.
you
And and I'm glad you're thinking ahead, right? Oh, I guess it's really close now. You're just a year or two thinking ahead for when this moment.
most, we're gonna claim that.
Okay, okay.
At most, this fall, honestly, this fall, I should be finished this fall.
And you intend to create a space that is your space, right? And if a student brings it into your space and you are going to deal with it, and you're already running through the hypotheticals of what you're going to have to do and how you'll be
Yeah.
organized enough to support them, they are lucky students,
And
whoever
it
gets
goes
you.
back to environment too, like I spoke of
Hmm.
earlier. This culture. Like, are we going to do a culture of silence, or are we going to have a culture of advocacy and support, and
Yes.
positivity, and encouragement and motivation, like through it all. Yeah.
Yes. Beautiful. Okay. I'm very comfortable with that segment. Let's take another coffee break. I see we start running long once we start talking. But it goes by so quickly.
I can run my mouth. So if you need me, like, okay, 6 o'clock, Ray, 6 o'clock.
We will be right back. We are back and we got to get through this next segment because we need to talk about self-care. We've talked about the resilience, we've talked about being uncomfortable. And I do think people largely ignore taking care of themselves, both physically and mentally. And when you are in those tough periods of time where it almost feels like a dull ache or what have you, Not, I'm definitely not talking about the acute moments, but the dull moments. You kind of forget that there are things you can do to make it a little bit easier for yourself. And in my experience, your work product can suffer when you are just kind of allowing yourself to suffer and not doing things for yourself. Now, Rae, you spoke specifically a little bit about burnout during this last year. Um, and I think you were talking, oh, yes. You, during the coffee break, you were mentioning that you were evaluated very well by your students because you gave them some space. You saw them as full humans who were going through a tough time during the pandemic. And you kind of allowed them to take care of themselves in a way where others maybe did not do so. And so, can you just tell us more about your thoughts on self care during this time or at any point during your journey?
Self-care. So I definitely have been putting more effort towards that, especially during, the COVID shutdown that we had and when I was just home. I really was thinking about, what definitely brings me joy. So during that time when we were all, in our homes, I always liked to paint and just do arts and crafts. And I got into that again. I just started buying canvases and watercolor painting and
Mm,
started painting, and it was really relaxing for me to do that. I always like to do arts and crafts on the side, and I just got away from that, like starting my program, my PhD program. It's like, what's room to draw or write or do anything? So
yeah.
I got into writing again. I really like to do poetry. So just where I'm at, writing those thoughts down, and then also doing the arts and crafts. Those were really important for me to fill back up. Got
Mm-hmm.
more into audiobooks as well, and then just talking to family more and friends more. Calling them, seeing how they were. That actually like would lift my spirits. I
Oh,
realized too is having that community and connection with people. So I am really about being connected, interacting with different people, and I find like in that space, like it just fills me back up. And so I was able to do that, trying to do that more often. And that would definitely, that's a part of self-care too, which is weird, like, pouring out for someone else or being there for talking to other people, but
yeah.
that's taking care of me too. It made me feel really good to be able to be connected. So
One thought that you may not like is that as you transition from your career as a student to your full-time professional career, you might have to like be rigorous about scheduling your self-care because I mean your career is going to take up a lot of your
and that,
time.
yeah, that goes back to the time management. It's really
Yes.
like, yeah, and I said that too. I'm a part of a women's group through my church actually, and I was like, I need to block off time. I know we meet every Wednesday evening, and I
Mm-hmm.
need to just save that time now so I can be in community with other women. So I was just thinking about that actually today too, like how I need to make sure I schedule that, and I don't plan experiments or lab time there
Yeah.
and everything else, but I'm just doing that because it's important.
I am a big proponent of time management as one aspect of self care. Because, you know, if you, and some people do it just to a light degree. They're like, if you call after this time, you know, the phone's not even going to ring. I'm not even going to know, or what have you. Um, in the morning, so for me, I wake up before my husband, sneak out from the bed to the couch. I do some reading. You know, I might turn Gardener's World, which is a show from BBC, just about gardening, or just turn on the background, look at the pretty flowers, or what have you, before the day really begins. As a way to, I think, as you said, kind of fill me up a little bit. And I don't really have the language to describe it better, like fill me up. I don't know what I'm being filled with. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Rest.
But and I don't even notice when I'm emptied, right? But when I'm doing the things that I know give me that positive feeling, I'm so much better for the day. So much better. I mean, y'all, these conversations are not easy. We come in and talking about racism. That's not
can
easy.
imagine.
like y'all know it's not easy because you're not doing it like you're supposed to.
Yeah.
That wasn't to you. That was to the audience. But it can be very tough, and so I do make a point of taking care of myself. Not always first, but I make sure that I do get taken care of. And I'm glad that you have made that part of your regimen as well. So as we draw to the end, you mentioned during that last coffee break that you really wanted to make sure your grad students heard this and that they took some things out. But you know, like you said, students can be pressed for time. So if you know what people need to get out of it, you know, let's just put it up front. We could tell them just to go to the end and then get what they need.
Right, just go to the last 30 seconds. I think definitely big takeaway for any grad student is you are worth it. You are worthy. You are there for a reason, and you will be a change agent in whatever area you are that you need to be. And a lot of people actually, not just someone, needs you there. So continue to push and persevere. Don't quit, never quit, and you will finish your degree. You definitely will finish your degree. And get your community. Definitely get your community of people to continue to support you and push you forward.
Well said. And a great lesson. Please, I'm rooting for you. You don't know me. We've never met. But we need you to keep going forward, even though we know how hard it is.
I appreciate that. That means the world to me. I know you asked, like, what can someone listening do to support you? Just encouragement on my journey. Literally, that I had that written, just encouragement for my journey. It means the world to me to know I have people rooting for me and celebrating me. I will make sure everyone is there at the defense as well.
Yes.
At that finish line and going forward as well. So I have it in me. I know sometimes we all get burnt out, but I definitely have the drive and the passion to be in those spaces that I'm needed. So thank you so much, Jerome. That means a lot to me.
Thank you for being here right at what is the beginning. This is just the beginning for you.
Love it. Thank you so much. It is. It really is. I feel excited about what's to come. Like I just feel so filled with like excitement and anticipation. I don't even know what all is going to happen, but I just have that in me. So.
Well, we're going to check in with you and find out.
I'm looking forward to it. Give me all the good news.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Rae. You've been a treat, a delight.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's been great to be here.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining in the conversation today. If you would like exclusive access to live streams of these conversations, if you want to hear what goes on during the coffee breaks, or if you'd like to join a community of people who help to make this podcast possible, then please join our Patreon community at patreon.com/bottomlesscoffee. Bottomless Coffee Podcast is produced by me, Jerome Evans, on social media everywhere as @JeromeTEvans. Our Patreon producers are listed in the episode description. You can connect with the podcast on Instagram at Bottomless Coffee Podcast. Our music is by Noir et Blanc V and God Mode. Thanks all, and I'll see you next time.